Welcome to the Longevity CEO podcast, where we dive into the science of living healthier, longer lives, share real-time stories of resilience, and discover actionable strategies to help you lead with impact and purpose. Because being the CEO of your health and longevity starts today. Welcome to the Longevity CEO. I am your host, Greg Shindler. Today's guest, Paul Kirchhoff of Epix Global. Paul, welcome. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. Even just the warm-up lap we just took before we hit the record button. I was like, we got to hit record because there's some gold in here. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. Thank you for having me. And, I've been a huge fan of yours and everything that you're doing and what you stand for. And we were already spitting gold, so we might as well just get right to it.
Just keep going. Yeah, I usually like to try to talk about the whole origin story thing. And after reading your intake and looking at, where you grew up next to the Grand Canyon and sort of, the immigrant descent, if you will, and where talk a little bit about that, because I think it's important to understand with people where they come from as we start to learn more about your story, which is just fascinating. Because I've been a big fan of yours too since we met in Lake Nona in Florida. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. You do what? You travel around so it's cool.
Yeah,
I'm going to spoiler alert. So we'll get to it. But tell us a little bit about you and where'd you come from?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, it's kind of funny how I explain, when somebody says, who are you? And I can, kind of distill it down into some things that are really the core foundations that make me. And I'll just share these with you. Number one, father, who's no longer alive. We talked about that. He died at age 56, but he was German and my mom, Mexican. So I'm biracial, even though I look like I got my dad's genes. Maybe I'm a wolf in, sheep's clothing. But that's important to me because I think from a very young age, it taught me how powerful love is, because they were in South Texas, which you can imagine that was a tough place to be biracial in the 50s and having love see you through. So I have a lot of respect for that. And that's been a foundation of mine. The other one is I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona, right next to the Grand Canyon, probably hiked 95% of what that canyon has to offer, which very few humans have ever done. And, when you grow up in that area right next to the Navajos and the Hopis and the Havasupai, you really you grow up with a fond appreciation, not just that, but responsibility for the environment and for nature. And once again, for cultures that have different beliefs than you. So I think that's the other one. And then the third and the final one I would share is, my parents grew up very poor. They were picking cotton in South Texas to make ends meet for the whole family. And my father made it to become a pharmacist, right? He was the only one out of everybody's, both sides of the family, to get a college degree. So he kind of made this leap to middle class. And I worked hard as a tech entrepreneur and maybe got a little bit beyond that. But I always feel like I kind of, I'm always happy being a middle-class dude with one foot on the ground, knowing how difficult it must have been for them to get me to where I am. And I just don't take that for granted. So to some degree, I'm a little piece of everybody: economic strata up and down, racial up and down, religious up and down, and even, this responsibility to what's real in the world and in the environment.
I mean, I think that's a story of the American dream, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that have a version of that story with first, the generation gets here and just hard scrabble, hard work, whatever they can do to get here, and then try to start creating a better life for the subsequent generations. And that's an American tale. It's a uniquely American tale. I have some good friends that I was just with this past weekend, and he's from London and she's Vietnamese, and they came over on one of the refugee boats, and, he was an orphan. He and a twin brother was orphan in London, literally, had a list of offenses that he'd been in jail for by the time he was 13. This is 12 feet long. And in their place, they had this massive American flag. It's artwork on the wall. It's beautiful. And it's very prominently displayed right in their living room. And they said, we're both so grateful to this country for what it gave to us, what we were, the opportunity we were able to get. That's why that's there. And I was like, that's really cool. He's like,
yeah, it's amazing, man. It's amazing. What's interesting too, is back to the precursor to this conversation, we were talking about our fathers, right? And we were talking about how, it's funny you say the American dream, and the American dream is, the traditional American dream that I always thought about when I was young. I mean, just to give you an example, dude, I remember my first company I ever started. I wouldn't even say, people say this all the time, but I out earned my father when I was like 13 selling photographic business cards. Like that was cutting edge at the time, right? And I just remember sitting there thinking like, wow, like, this is it's so hard. And if you think about your parents' life and all the difficulties they had just to get you here, on this planet, I think what you heard in my comments was this just deep appreciation. And what I always tell people is like, it doesn't matter whether your parents were great parents, super shitty parents, or whatever, right? They had their own ups and downs on their path to whatever they thought the American dream was. But in the end, you and I would not be here having this conversation had they not fought their way through some valleys and some peaks along the way. And so my hope is for everybody that I run into to always recognize that, because it's too easy to criticize, especially parents, I think, where it's like, man, he was never here or whatever. But the reality is you can take that scorecard and just erase the whole goddamn thing, because you get to watch a sunrise or a sunset because of those parents, right? And no matter what happened, I always, tell people, by the way, I'll share something just really quick related to this. So I was telling you, my father passed away from a rare form of prostate cancer when he was 56, right? And both of us are right on top of that, coming up on that age, right on top of that age. And I think about how I feel like biologically and everything else. And I'm like, holy shit, man, I can't even imagine when I was 20 thinking about him being sick, that he was like I am right now, full of life, full of possibility, almost as if I'm like a 26-year-old, just still hoping that, I can hit a new dream or whatever. But I had the fortunate element of knowing that, because I was looking at these PSA numbers, that he was like in a decline, and it was happening fast. And so one day, as the universe would have it, I was supposed to be in a wedding, and I had in my gut to go home. Maybe this is quantum physics or whatever, but I go home. And it turns out that weekend was when he passed away. But on 2 days before he passed away, I went and found this mountaintop, and I went up there all by myself with a blank note paper. And I literally wrote down everything that I could even think of, that I was grateful for, that I apologized for, that I hoped for. And I must have come out of there with like 40 pages. It was me, a log, and a big view, right, in northern Arizona. And I got home and I sat next to him, and he was, fairly coherent. And I read it with him, right? I read it to him. And I got to tell you, man, like after he passed away, it made it so that I could recover very quickly, because there was nothing else I should have said, or I could have said. I exhausted it all. And to me, it's like in our conversation, whether you sit down next to a gravesite and do that same exercise is so important, because to some degree, whether there's some weird quantum entanglement between us, you are putting it out into the world that like you just gave a blank sheet of paper to that person, and they're not burdened, whether they're here or not, with the anger or negative emotions that you carried with you at them, right? And if your parents are alive, find the fucking mountaintop like right away. Don't waste time, get up there and exhaust it, man, because like, man, I think that's one of the most like, monumental things that I've ever done in my life, was to have some blessing and the invisible hand guide me to that mountaintop. But now I always tell everybody, and by the way, it doesn't have to be your parents, it could be your kids too, right? But what an important lesson I learned, years and years ago. And I hope more people do that and, share
I love that. Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, you're referring to, I did a post where I was sitting at a gravesite of my biological father, and people have heard me talk about it before. The first 12 years were pretty rough. And then there's this big gap where I don't go back there to the cemetery. He took his life when I was 12. I don't go back there for 43 years.
Yeah.
42, 3 years. And so yesterday I went. It was the only second time I've gone back in 45 years. And it was a completely different experience. And you can start to see some of the wounds are healing. And it's work, man. It's intentional. It's work. And to your point, if they're alive, yes, right? And if they're not, you say found the mountaintop. You carry that stuff around, and it's you're the only one hurting from it, right? Me, the anger and the betrayal and and then whatever else. So you got to do the work and get the healing done. And yesterday was really peaceful. It was a beautiful day south of Houston, about 35 minutes. I sat out there for about a half hour, just had a chat with a man who I was angry at for a long part of my life. And it felt good to be unburdened. It really did.
Yeah. It's such a huge deal. I mean, honestly, like even if this podcast stopped right here, that is the most that might be the most valuable thing that we could ever cough up to anybody, right? Is freeing up somebody else, whether they have a burden or not, and freeing yourself up. Because without it, you find yourself shutting down at a moment's notice without understanding why, getting mad, getting frustrated. It carries with you. And what we were speaking about before this was, the second that, you kind of realize this moment that we're having right now, hopefully for a lot of other people, all of a sudden, if you're lucky, I was telling you, like I was learning this at the same time I was speaking it out and telling and putting perspective in for my son. At the time that he was 10, right? Now he's 22. And the emotional strength that these lessons gave him have just ricocheted times a million, right? And so the thing that you and I were speaking about beforehand, which is so valuable, is yes, it's important to do that for people you love, right? And by the way, again, we're talking about parents. It could be your kids. It could be anybody. But at the same time, when you free yourself up and you communicate the perspective of what you just did to free yourself up, it can reverberate into other people's lives to such a degree that you directly will have created a legacy of more emotionally stable person. And when you think about this world, isn't most conflict because of innate emotions that are firing, that somebody, is wondering why you didn't get to work early, because that's your expectation. Is some employee didn't get to work early, or why does your wife not do, or husband do this? It's like, the more stable you are, the more accepting you are of anything else, because nothing else really matters in the end.
100%. Yeah. Right? It's, words, right? Words have created more conflict than a lot of things. But to your point, when I'm learning a lot about being emotionally regulated and or dysregulated. And when you're dysregulated and this thing's trying to spin the narrative and the story, it doesn't really work out very well, right? And you have to get regulated and get your emotions so that you're responding instead of reacting. And what I've found in the last, honestly, year and a half is that it's a lot of work, but it's so worth it, because just to your point, the damage we can do with acting on our emotions and spitting words that we may want to take back or regret in those moments and stuff like that is really, can be catastrophic. It can stay with people, especially if it's with our children and or people close to us and our loved ones. And there was a saying that said, we tend to hurt those we love the most, maybe because we think they won't leave us or it's safe or something. But there's a lot of collateral damage that's done in the process. So, I love that you were showing your son that at 10. And, I've always kind of worked with my sons and try to tell them these lessons. And some of them were old Texas lessons, right? They'd come to the door and be like, well, it's not my fault. And I'm like, really? Whose fault is it? Let's talk to that guy. Right? Let me, where's he? There's old stuff like that they heard 1,000 times growing up. Yeah. But now my two youngest are in college. They're like, hey, a lot of those things you were teaching us, we get it now. And I'm like, well, that's how it works.
Yeah, totally, man. By the way, I think the other thing is that, in addition to this being important for family and everything else, I mean, you can't even, until you have this moment of, which I'll explain, a moment that I've seen. By the way, anybody who listens to this on, who follows you may be wondering, what the hell does this dude know about, any of what we're talking about? What's his expertise? Dude, I got a PhD in making mistakes. Number one, I got a PhD in waiting too goddamn long to figure this out. Right. And the other thing is, but the company that I have, which you're a member of, I've hosted 500 masterclasses on everything from, stem cells and exosomes to hacking Instagram for growth. And one thing, because of this being so important that we do, is we keep finding super talented transformational coaches. These are people that are experts at getting you to arrive at this conversation that we're talking about. And I give them the pulpit in front of this entire global network. And the reason why is because, as we were, talking about earlier, I don't know this wouldn't even been on my radar before, but after, there is no doubt that this is as important as the health and safety of my family and people I love, right? And then it's this self-comfort, right? Without trying, gratitude without trying. You're just, you've shed all these things that cause you negative emotions. And then everything else, money, fame, recognition, is distant third, right? Through N, where I told you N is like, who gives a shit?
Right.
It's all that stuff can be lumped together. That's how powerful this is. So I think it's always important. And I sit on these things and I watch people. Some people talk about flow. Some people talk about coherence with your goals and quantum physics. And all of it is true, right? But what you always hope, including people that listen to this, is that somebody somewhere will be listening to two, Texas dudes talking about this and realize, wow, I wonder if it's me. I wonder if it's me that is causing me to get pissed off and to shut down at dinner or to bark out something, all these negative emotions. And the reality is, the more you dig into it, the more you find out it is you. And you have the power to like undo things that you might not even know are affecting you, and the power to choose where you're going. But it does take work.
It does take work. But the journey's worth it for sure.
For sure.
All right, let's go. You mentioned tech entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about Epics Global. You just were going into that a little bit there, but you also live a really cool lifestyle.
Yeah.
You and your, can I say your name?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Of course,
you and Brooke have this really cool lifestyle. I was just sort of enamored when we first met in Florida. So talk a little bit about being the tech entrepreneur and your lifestyle and how you guys have designed this to then I want to transition into, because when we met, it was at sort of a precursor, if you will, to the biohacking conference.
That's right.
So I know health and biohacking's big thing on your radar. So I want to learn more about that as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess first and foremost, and this stuff all dovetails, but let me back up. So I had a company where I had grown it, fairly significantly, and I was burnt out so bad. I would have gladly given the keys to somebody just to take it, right? Rather than sell it. I could care less. But I was so burnt out. And what I realized, which I think is a very important common characteristic of overachievers, let alone super achievers, is that, I think Malcolm Gladwell one time or somebody said, hey, in order to be an expert, it takes 10,000 hours at doing something. I honestly think if you want to be the best in the world, it takes 50,000 hours. And let me just tell you the consequence of 50,000 hours doing, whatever, is that your health suffers, because you're not putting enough time into it, right? Focusing. Your network might be small, right? Because you're not hanging out with anybody. It takes 50,000 hours to be great. And you sure as hell aren't living an interesting life. And I got to the point at one point where nobody was calling me to see what I was doing. I was like, this is crazy. And I was, maybe, bordering a little bit on depression. And I knew I had to change something dramatically. And so I changed adventure, and I started adventuring the shit out of the planet, climbing live volcanoes, right? Driving tanks through houses to, help destroy, crazy stuff. But it was fulfilling something with me. And I realized, wow, there's a lot of other people that are at risk of time passing, going after, for whatever reason, right? Could be, insecurities, fear of not being good enough. A lot of entrepreneurs have. And so here you are focusing on achievement, and you get there one day. So I had to change something, and it was adventure. And the more I went on these adventures, the more people that were also achievers were like, man, when I sell my company, I want to do that too. But I hadn't sold my company. I had to do this for life. And I remember, taking a customer call on that live volcano, and the steepness of the hill was like this. There's a little Nicaraguan guy chopping the way to the top of this thing that you can feel shaking. And I got my finger through a tree, and there's thorns coming through my hand. And I'm on a call with a customer thing because I can't afford to lose it, or my business would have folded, right? The point is that I wove it into whatever I had to do for my life, with trying not to sacrifice what had got me there. And the more I did that, the more people wanted to come when they found out that I hadn't sold a company yet. I was just doing this. So the more they came, the more I knew that I could throw adventures in front of people, and maybe I would keep their life interesting too, right? But we're talking about business. So then all of a sudden I'm like, well, if you know this skill and you know this skill, I'm going to combine you guys to help each other out. And that started the current venture. I'm going to get to the lifestyle in a second, but that started the adventure, because I was like, wow, it's important to have a life that's interesting. I think that's part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's also important to make progress. And I don't care whether you want to be famous or you want to make a bunch of money or whatever, but if we can help each other get there and keep doing adventures, that's going to be great. But guess what happened? guys like you started showing up because those things are important to you too, except you started to bring this incredible knowledge across the board of, emotional mastery, biohacking, right? All the advanced stuff that you're into, and even natural health moves, right? And so all these other people. So now all of a sudden, this Epics Global thing started to have these three big pillars to help people's lives. One was achievement, making that faster. One was adventure, making sure you're doing cool shit. And the third one was personal performance. How can you go forward? We'll talk about some of the technologies beneath these things because we're doing some really pioneering things with AI. But the point is the network had all the skills. So one day we're sitting in Austin, Texas, and I'm looking at my phone and I look at 5G and LTE around the US. And I leaned over to my wife and I said, hey, I have an idea. What if we sell everything, like everything, give away half our clothes, all the furniture, boat, anything else that we own, and let's build this next tech platform, which is kind of like a networking platform beyond LinkedIn, beyond Facebook. What if we do this from a bus? Let's buy a bus and we'll get a Jeep and we will move the front door every 120 days. And sometimes so we've been doing this for 4 years while this company is being built. So we've had, bear run across I'm gathering my shit to get inside as bear coming outside in Montana. We've been tracked by mountain lions in Big Bend, the deserts of Texas. But what I was telling you beforehand is the really cool thing that I'm pretty sure no other tech guy in Silicon Valley is living this life is I'll get up at 5 a.m., get a cup of coffee and a Jeep and go buy myself into 800,000 acres of wilderness, right? Where there's more mountain lion and bear than there are people. Watch the sunrise, wash my face in the Rio Grande, looking at Mexico, hoping I'm, with maybe a machete on my side or whatever. And then be home for 8 a.m. Zoom calls about the frontier of AI and biohacking or whatever. And it's just,
it.
but I got here because I found that all these things that are important in life, making progress, for me, it's innovation too, and a life of adventure, and, having a healthy connection to meditation. For me, it's nature, is also important, right? It's you can't burn time working as an entrepreneur with as a one-trick pony or finding your way into some kind of pattern. And so the way that we break the pattern all the time is we move the bus and the Jeep every 120 days somewhere, and every once in a while we put it in storage and we go somewhere overseas and we live in that culture for 120 days, the whole time working just as hard as you or anybody else. But it's just it's kind of a magical, efficient frontier of life, I think, where all these things, which again, they really do match to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're building a platform that can accelerate everybody's stuff that makes life great. And it's happening, so.
Yeah, no, it's a great platform. I'm, the one event in Colorado last year, I didn't get to go. Was that earlier this year? Or last year?
Last year. Mm-hmm.
Last year. Yeah, that I didn't get to go to. I was super bummed, but
yeah, what more?
For sure. So on the intake, there's a question in there about what is something that sort of has impacted you in a profound way negatively, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I loved your answer because and I'm not looking at it, but I can remember it.
Mm-hmm.
Was a few years ago, younger you might have listed 100 things, but now the way you view these things is that they're to be celebrated. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Tell me more about that, because that's a really interesting take. And I think that anyone listening to start thinking about, oh, this happened to me and this happened to me and this is a negative thing that happened to me. The way you framed it is really cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, man, I'll give you the specific one that you're talking about, because like nobody in their right mind, unless they actually are comfortable themselves, would share that one. But I'll get to that in a second. But what I wanted to say is it's very in line, dude, with what we're talking about, especially about your parents, right? Even if you had a parent that you had animosity towards for legitimate reasons, at some point there comes this moment of, wow, I can still find appreciation there because I wouldn't be enjoying this happy moment if it wasn't for that person, right? So I think that that's a very, very powerful thing. Of course, forgiveness, right? Forgiving yourself from doing stuff and forgiving the other person is all part of it. But I just wanted to always come back to that because I think it's so healing and empowering too. And what you don't realize is when it removes a burden from you, it gives you, it's like your center. If you have a bunch of negative stuff and a bunch of positive stuff, you may be living life right in between. Sometimes you're negative, sometimes you're positive. The second you solve that, your center goes to mostly positive with no effort whatsoever, which isn't that what like we want in life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think when you talk about framing things that are negative, like our parent conversation, that's an example. But another example is when stuff goes really bad for you, right? So the story, which I think is just, it's an amazing story, but I was in my 30s, which I'm way off of that now, happily. But I was in my 30s and I went to a happy hour and I think I had like 3 drinks, get pulled over for running past the stop sign. And these guys make me do the field sobriety test. And even now I aced it, but they said there was something in my eyes that had gave them some suspicion. So they put me in the back of a cop car, take me to jail. I'm sitting in this pool and everybody there looks like they might have murdered somebody. And I look like a preppy, right, at the time, right? That I'm like the president of the student council or whatever. And I'm just like shocked, right? Like to my core, because I'm a pretty good dude who never gets in trouble or whatever, even through life. And all these things are going through my head. Oh my God, like who's going to find out, right? At this point, I was already an entrepreneur. I'm like, if my employees find this out, is this going to be public? Oh my God, my parents would be so disappointed, like so much shit. So finally, long story short, as I get out of there and they're like, hey, listen, we're going to knock this thing down to a little, misdemeanor or whatever, but you still have to either choose to pay your fine or you have to do community service. And I'm like, I don't have any money right now, man. I'm a starving entrepreneur. And so I go, I'll do community service. So they give me some choices and I choose going to the school of the blind or something like this. And what happens is when they send out like old Netflix VHS tapes, they all come back, right? But they all got Braille on them. And so they need to be rewound. This is all my job was. I had to go to like thousands of things, put the tape in there and rewind it day after day after day. So the whole time I'm sitting there thinking like, this is like the low of the low, man. This was like, I'm joking about it now, but at the time it was like just depressing, shattering. I'm at the lowest point of life, right? Whatever. Anyway, what happened is I went to the guy and I said, hey, do you mind if I listen to some music or something? Because this is repetitive stuff for 8 hours a day for a long time. And he said, no. But instead, I started to listen to digital marketing guys. This is in the early forming of Facebook and everything else about SEO. And I just listened for 8 hours a day, nothing but SEO for days and days and days. And I came out of this thing with like such skill sets in digital marketing with no intent that is actually what started the digital marketing agency that I grew to a bunch of employees and a bunch of clients and set up, the life that I have right now. And that shit would have never happened if I hadn't been arrested and thrown in jail, man.
Listening to SEO tapes for 8 hours a day.
Yeah. But the point is that, and I share this, with the Epics membership too, because, to be honest, dude, I'm one of the things I'm the most proud of is there's software tools and platforms like Facebook or LinkedIn where you go there and maybe you get some value, maybe you don't. The thing that is remarkable about Epics, because it's full of people like us, is that there's a culture that wraps around it of like, hey, hardcore ambition, but make sure you enjoy yourself a little bit. Make sure you help each other. Make sure you approach everybody with humility and respect, right? There's a culture that's very powerful around it. But one of the things I love the most is we celebrate the lows, what you think are the lows, maybe more than the highs. And the reason why is because no matter what low you might think you're in right now, or that may come, because they surely will come, you can be goddamn sure that it is the precursor to a high, right? And so therefore, when something is brutal, you can look at this and be like, relax. If it's this bad right now, I just got to keep punching things forward. But at the end of the day, that upswing in the curve is going to happen. And I think, even something like that, getting arrested, right, as a entrepreneur trying to establish your name and all your parents and that, like, who would have known that is actually what catalyzed some major stuff in life in a positive way? And I think that exists all the time,
Yeah, that's a great example. I heard something the other day when the guy was talking about having these setbacks or challenges, and he said what he didn't realize then was that those were obstacles being moved out of the way so that he would be prepared for what was coming next. And I loved the way he framed it, right? And in this particular case, it was an old high school buddy or college buddy that was coming to town, and he had been down on his luck. He'd lost his job. His girlfriend moved out. He had about 60 days worth of money left in the bank and sent out a resume like 250 times, no bites. And his buddy's like, hey, what are you doing? I'm coming to town. And he said, where are you staying? And he goes, I don't know. I'll let you know when I get there. And he goes, stay with me. He said, truth is, I'm going through a tough time. I could use the company. So his friend does. tells him why he's there and this company that he's building and launching. He's an entrepreneur, and they throw in together and do this thing. And like 7 or 8 years later, they exit for $60 million. And so
Amazing.
when he's talking about it, he's like, I didn't realize that when I was losing my my condo and I lost my job and my girlfriend and I broke up, she moved out. Those were obstacles being moved out of the way so that I would be ready for, when his friend came to town and this next
Amazing.
opportunity. And I love the way he reframed that. Right. And I'm like, this is great. We don't always know what's coming. We don't know what the plan is going to be. You just have to know there is one. Right. And just be ready for it and be open to it when it gets there. And mindset is critical. Mindset's key. Right. And like you just talked about, having that mindset, had you not done this, had this not happened to you, you don't, one thing leads to the next.
I mean, I think the point is, like, if you look back at life, I always share like something that I think just drives it home. Do you think that anybody who got to the top of Mount Everest, which is remarkable, got there by not going through the valleys? The helicopter didn't drop them off at the top. They had to go through some very tough times where they doubted themselves. They had no oxygen. They were about to like call it quits, and somehow they got there. So in those moments where they must have been ready to call it quits, imagine if they would have, right? And therefore, all you can do when dark days come is keep showing up with a blank sheet of paper, write the list of things you could do, prioritize it, and start knocking it out. And the world has a way of solving it for you. As a matter of fact, dude, you'll love this. This Thursday, an incredible friend and a guy in Epics, John Assaraf, he was he's doing a session around advanced brain training, but he was on Oprah's The Secret, right? The very famous show because of law of attraction. He has like thank God that's the only story that I have about like, the jail part and getting in trouble, but he has a much longer one than that. And yet at some point he was rescued from going down that way. And he had a vision board and he put a picture of this big old mansion or whatever. And years later, he's sitting in that mansion that he bought. And he had no idea that he had bought a mansion that he had put on a vision board when he was just starting to make the turn out of like what could have been a very, very bad life with gangs and other stuff like that. And all of a sudden he had made it. And so on one hand, there's like the appreciation. I mean, let me just say this. I think for anybody who's listening to this, it'd be almost impossible to build a discipline where it's like, holy shit, man, things are so difficult. I'm just going to appreciate it. That's a very, very advanced, powerful move. However, I think if you don't view it that way and keep chugging, you'll never get to the point where you look back and appreciate it, right? You just can't give up. You keep going. What John was showing is that if you ever dream about where you want to go, put it into the universe, because on one hand, the downs will precede the ups, but the ups might be heading towards something that you dream about if you just keep plugging away, right? It's just, there's really remarkable stuff. I have a feeling that you and probably the people that, you're connected to are like the people in Epics where it's like all these things that we're talking about, man, emotional mastery, undoing things that you didn't even ask for that are deep in you, right? These are all things that are real and they're very powerful. And yet on the other hand, there's this interesting quantum physics to the world, right? Like, what is it that makes that situation for John happen, right? Can it happen for me? And, and there's just, it's like there's just enough evidence of everything to where all the smart people like you, people that we hang out with are like, I want to dig in one level deeper. There's something there that I might be able to control reality and where I'm going. I might be able to be unburdened by no matter how bad things were in the past. And I think that's to give you and me with Epics credit, we're pulling this into the world and we're showing other people that there is this thing here that you might never have even thought about. I can't even imagine, I'm sure you too, how many people have gone through life where it's like they don't even run into this thing where there's another gear in them, right? They just battle their positives and negatives and life happens and it goes away. And yet here we are, both of us saying, man, I wish I would have known this much younger. Yeah, but the truth is there's never a bad time to be happy.
No,
right?
No, it's never too late to start. There's never a bad time. I was talking to my oldest son is 25 and we were together yesterday and he and his younger brothers and I, and we were talking about that. And I said, it was just this one particular lesson. And I said, if you get this now at 25, I can't tell you how far ahead of the game you are by just understanding this basic thing right here. I said, it took me 55 years to learn this. And to learn it at 25 is a gift. And you hope they're listening. You hope they're paying attention. And, it feels like I'm dad, right? So if you had been there and said it, he'd be like, your buddy Paul's the smartest dude I've ever met.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was like when it came out of my mouth. So it's, but yeah, to that point. And I had a conversation last night. My partner and I'm in Texas right now, and she's back in Virginia. And we were talking, and it was almost like, okay, hey, good night. And I launched a question about mindset and visualization. And she's a lot smarter about this stuff than I am. And it was an hour later that we were still going through a lot of what you just talked about. So it's interesting. We're having this conversation again right now. And I do believe that if you try to visualize something and you put the mansion on the board and you say, okay, all right, I'll try it, whatever. I mean, nothing else is working. If you go into it with that attitude, then I think it's going to be a struggle. All right. And this is what we were talking about last night, my partner and I. But if you go into it believing that day in and day out, and it's kind of like that affirmation of, I am lovable, I am worthy, I am deserving, I am, if you say it enough times for long enough, consistently, it gets planted back into your subconscious, which is the name of the game, right? The whole thing is trying to rewire some of this negative self-talk that happened to us, most likely in our childhoods, that we've been trying to do. And I think that a lot of the visualization, the mindset, then when I talk about it being critical, it is everything. It has to start there. To the point we mentioned earlier, if we can be regulated emotionally and have our mindset focused on the positive things, and man, that's the best we can hope for. And then what we start to create the impact. So I'm all about this adversity to impact theme, right? In fact, when we met Nona earlier that year at Lake Nona Impact Forum, that was the theme: is how do you take all this adversity, overcome it, turn it around, and create impact? You've done it. I'm doing it. The community in Epics Global, you start to attract these people, and then that ripple effect becomes larger and larger. I was talking about this the other day with some of the things that we've done at the clinic I built previous. There were veterans that we treated. They've been 22, 23 years in the military. They're now into anti-human trafficking and being repurposed in the world to use their skill set as a force for good. And I was thinking, man, we worked on TBIs. We worked on their joints, mobility, so the pain and their joint pain and things like this, so that they could go back out into the world, save more lives, help more people. And I thought about the ripple effect of just those two guys that we treated and helped, and how many people they pulled out of rubble in Turkey, or they got, children out of harm's way in Haiti, or wherever in the world they all go to. And I'm like, that's badass. That's legacy. That's something I want to be a part of. And to me, that's creating impact, right? How can I do something that will help create impact for people I'll never know, never meet, and don't need to, but just know that we're helping a little bit, just a little. There's only two guys, but those two guys have saved a lot of lives, right? And a lot of them children. So
it's incredible, man. I know, it really brings to the point, like, no impact is too small. I mean, like, I think I can't even remember whether we were talking about this before or after we hit record, but like, we were talking about how a lot of what we're talking about here, and a lot of what is inside perpetually of this Epics platform, with people who are gifted at helping other people with the emotional side of things, which is everything, by the way, is like, all I really care about is, and success is, if somebody who's listening to the two of us talk about this just has that curiosity to ask the question, I wonder if it's me. Because if you ask yourself that, and the answer is it's you, but you got to go figure out what is it and how do you overcome it. You're right. It's, the mission in the middle of it is you're Jason Bourning yourself into a different version of yourself, right? And that happens with repetition and burning in this, these things that you were talking about, these, like, beliefs and everything else. It's a process, but there's just, I'm telling you, like, there's nothing more important than that, because it moves the meter to happy, right? And that's, you're a nightmare to people if you're not. You just are,
100%.
So it's like, what are you waiting for, man? Let's go.
I feel like that question, I wonder if it's me. Like, if you're asking it, it was probably you, right?
It is you, fool. Like, you know what? Let me rephrase that. Don't even ask that. I'm telling you right now, it's you, fool. It's 100% you. I'm happy to tell you that.
Hey, I got a question about the RV lifestyle and all that stuff, because I know you and Broker, health is important, and wellness, and it's kind of one of the pillars that you are a part of your ecosystem. How do you on the road, when you're camping out for 120 days now, I mean,
Yep.
camping out, I mean, you
Yeah.
guys have a big,
Yep.
motorhome bus. But like, talk to me about like working out or, being healthy, beyond,
Yeah.
what there's probably not a gym right there in the campground. So how do you guys, still prioritize your health and stuff like that by living and also live the same lifestyle?
Yeah. I got a couple of answers to that. But the first things first is, so I got two sets of dumbbells, right? Like some 25s and 35s, which is just good enough for that. And then I have bands, a whole set of bands that I can hook to the top of the back ladder. And now you've got like, tricep stuff, back, you got everything you need, right? Yeah. And then, I always like, this is actually a really funny story. I run, like I want to run in nature, right? Like, maybe 8 miles every other day or whatever. And when I run, because I'm in places where you could be killed by nature, I run, I listen in my headphones, believe it or not, this is another first for like a tech CEO. In my headphones is mariachi music. For whatever reason, I run with mariachi music. Here's the deal. I run with a knife extended on the inside of my hand, right? Because like, if in fact a mountain lion came out, you'd have zero time to do anything other than pray to God you could stick this thing in somebody. And I've been cut off by like packs of coyotes and stuff before, so it's not far fetched where we are sometimes deep in remotely. But the funny thing is that if anybody's a runner, a lot of times I'll have a phone in one hand and the knife in the other, and that just has become like a natural balance. So the other day, I had a guy on a golf cart where sometimes we go into Las Vegas. We park our bus in a nice place as a little reward to come back to civilization. And the guy in a golf cart pulled me over and he said, dude, what do you think you're doing? And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? And he's like, you're running around this like luxury motorhome resort with a knife extended from one hand. And I'm like, oh my God, man, I'm so sorry about that. It's just the way that I run. It's kind of funny. But the point is that there's something about like, nature's scheduling for sure, like breaks from work, like for me, 11 a.m. But I got to tell you, here's what's really cool. And if you haven't seen this, I'll share this with you separately. The technology that we're building into the Epix platform for everybody is unprecedented. Two of them are our own. We have an executive AI team for everybody's business, which is intelligent. We have AI for networking. So you can just ask a question. It'll pull the right people and make an intro. But through a partnership, we have predictive AI for your own biology and your own genetics. And what it does is it's an app. It takes 2 pictures with your clothes on, front, center, sideways, and then asks you about 10 questions. And the science and studies have been 20 years leading up to this. The AI has been for 8 years being built. And I think all of the research combined, it's like 300 million years of human data. So it's all science backed. But I got to tell you, it will literally predict who you are mentally, how you view the world, your strengths, and predict everything about you. There's 16 science heuristics from embryology, apometry, the ratio of your limbs. It all zeroes down into who you must be. And I believe it's like 98, 99% accurate. So what's cool is we're giving everybody their own biology in their hand. And what's amazing about that, because it is highly accurate. I mean, it knows that Brooke has ADHD and she needs to get up and move. But as a human, before she does work, it knows that I am goal oriented. I don't need anybody to tell me what to do, and I'll build a plan to get there. It knew this from 2 pictures and 10 random different questions. The uniqueness about it, though, and here's why I'm sharing this with you, is that back to fitness, is that everybody, rightfully so, is a mathematical unit of one. So when you hear about keto diet number 57, how the hell do you know whether it's exactly perfect for you versus for your significant other or your friends or whatever? You don't. And the technology is so powerful that it will help to shape the way you should do work genetically. So for example, it'll tell me genetically I'm more predisposed to get up early, prioritize, then do creative work, take a break, come back, burn a little bit of energy, come back. And it's for sleep, work, mindfulness, and of course, food and fitness. But it's so far beyond these other technologies. And the reason we're doing this is because when you think about, fitness for you, right? And being well, I mean, how do you know what's exactly right for you? I think with all the stuff you read, whether it's Dave Asprey or all the, folks that you and I might know, those are all still generic case studies to them. Like, how do you know what's you? So give you an example. There's even generative AI in this thing. The other day, I actually said to my own biology in my own hand, I'm thinking about doing a 3-day fast. What is the best recommendation for me? And it basically knew, hey, Paul, because you've been running way above average lately, and you're in Los Angeles, and the pollutants and allergies are high, I would suggest you adjust what you would normally do to this. So it's real time. And but it's even more powerful than that, man. I mean, it's like,
Wow.
it's like when you know this about your significant other. I mean, I might have been, telling Brooke, why do you keep getting up and having to move around? I mean, I know you got ADHD. Imagine at work, right? Like you're telling your employees, why the hell are you coming in at 9 a.m. when everybody's supposed to be here at 8, right? Well, the truth is, biologically, they are optimized to work later. And if you knew that about your significant other at a biology level, about yourself or your employees, it changes everything.
Yeah.
So we're kind of pioneering, and this is available to you and everybody who's in Epics, but we're pioneering precision health with heavy AI, science backed, so that you now have yourself in your hand and you can bounce food, fitness, everything. But the truth is, this thing will start to help you shape what you're genetically optimized for, which is really, really cool.
So I love that. And I love the idea too about organizations having this tool available.
That's right.
To understand better their people.
Each other. Yeah, for sure. It's really cool. We can bring that back here another time.
Yeah. I would love to learn more about just that.
Yeah. Super cool stuff.
What else? What's the vision of Epics?
Well, I think that number one, I have, sometimes in life, second movers in business kick ass. And I've been fortunate to watch the big guys go first. And if you think about what they've done, they basically said, hey, I'm going to give you a tool to stay in touch. I'm going to give you a tool to put your resume, right? That's LinkedIn. Stay in touch might be Facebook, to communicate, things in images with Instagram or whatever. But I think that, I think in the end, because of their advertising model, they're all of them are having to keep your attention because of advertising, which means they're all kind of like devolving into TikTok, right? Everything's these little micro videos. And so when you look at people that are spending 5 hours a day watching grown men fart in Mentos and Diet Cokes or whatever, it's like, is that the greatest return on life? And what we're doing both with technology, culture, and everything else is I've had the luxury of like removing the things that cause people harm in benchmarking, right? Like women needing to think that they have to have a filter to be beautiful, guys thinking that a Lambo equals success, right? The conversation we're talking about is front and center, right? Like strengthen yourself, help each other, strengthen yourself. So my hope is that it becomes a destination where instead of spending time connected to this platform and technology, like we're developing things so you spend more time hugging somebody you love, watching a sunset, to the point where if you log into the platform between 5 and 6 p.m., we stop your login. We literally pop something up that says, hey, Greg, it looks like it's, happy hour where you are. Instead of logging in, why don't you go to the mirror and appreciate what a mathematical miracle you are? There is nobody on the planet like you. And when you're ready to get it on, come back here and we're going to help you get to where you're going with health, adventure, or achievement. And it's just, it's such a more powerful thing for the world to come to a place where everybody enters knowing that there is no benchmark. It's just their own progress is the only thing, their happiness and their progress. And yet everything that makes life great goes faster because the entire network is ready with tools, technology, AI, whatever, just to help you get to that next level and therefore possibly create the greatest return on life. Because, if we're only here for 83.2 years or whatever, I'd like to be maxed it out the whole way. And nobody is by yourself. It's too difficult.
Well, we're in the business of trying to increase that, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Take that, to add some more years.
That's right.
But healthy years, and I think that I was talking about that the other day and somebody was asking, about the definition of aging. And I said, it's just the functional decline of a living organism over a period of time. And it's not the period of time part that we need to focus on. It's the functional decline part. Because if we can't mitigate and slow that, then the period of time part doesn't matter because nobody's signing up for it, right? We need to be If we're going to live to 93 or 103 or 123, the health span's got to come along with it,
Dude, totally.
93 has to be the new 60 or whatever.
Well, and by the way, Greg, I mean, think about what we're talking about here, right? I mean, we're talking about like emotional stability, which only comes from what the whole conversation has been about. You cannot be healthy if you have high anxiety and all these things. That's already been proven. I'm not an expert in that, but I read just enough studies and paid attention just enough to know that's a real thing. So all of a sudden, what we're talking about here is take care of who you are and how you view the world so that you can be happy and comfortable no matter what good or bad things have happened. Humongous, maybe the foundation of everything. And then all of a sudden you're talking to another person that has a culture and ecosystem of that respect and everybody helping you, but also technology that can help fully optimize these areas of from mind to body of what is good for you uniquely. And what I was telling you before we jumped on here is that because of people like you in the group and me with a different way of thinking about health, not only are we bringing precision health optimization, right, in a way that nobody else has with technology, but we're attracting people that are now taking some of that information and being able to deliver, personalized nutrition. So these supplements that you need are not one pony fits all. Like, this is for you. This is uniquely for you. So not only do you know yourself and can screen everything around health, and this thing will help optimize it for you, right, depending on how hard you want to follow it, but you also now have personalized nutrition. And then here you guys come with, personalized natural healing, right, with cutting edge technology and stem cells and these things. And if you think about all of that, well, all of what you and I are talking about, that to me, that is the macro frontier of health that is happening in its own trajectory, right? And even the functional medicine folks that have incredible skill sets to heal in ways that are non-evasive and old school may not have access to the precision health like shaping of a human one-on-one at that unique level that I'm building at the bottom, right? But all these things together are like, how do we help you holistically, mind, body, unique to you, right? Not everybody else, be in the exact algorithm and the exact mathematical efficient frontier of health the whole way, right? The whole way. And then if you want to extend your life, all the longevity stuff,
Right.
just continues, but you can't get there if you're adopting health practices that are not for you uniquely, right? That's just like it's a fundamental thing. And then the best we can all do is we all read a book that, a bestseller thinks, and we're like, shit, I'll try that type of coffee, or I'll try that, which is better than nothing, right? Than it's slamming, bratwurst 24/7. But the point is that it's still, how do I know that shit's perfect for me? Do you know that one of the things, back to what you had said, we do a session once a month called Biology and Business. And what it is it's like, hey, if you and the rest of your team or employees knew everything that this AI function can tell you about each other, right? Which is not non-invasive, but it tells you how people view the world. How would that change the dynamics? And one of the most amazing things is that you end up understanding that when people, and this is part of their studies, when you tell people to do something healthy, like, hey, everybody should walk 5 miles at least a day, it turns out that like 15%, same thing with lifting weights, 15% actually have negative outcomes, right? Even though it seems completely stupid that all of us should get a little healthier, the truth is 15% on anything have negative outcomes. Well, why is that? It's because their unique equation does not process that activity as well as doing something else, right? And so how do you know which one is right for you? That's what this technology and all these programs we wrap around it are trying to do. And it's so important because ultimately, the environment you're in, the people you hang out with, the food you eat, everything makes an equation one-on-one, right?
Yeah, I think it's right on line too with everything where look, diagnostic tools are advancing like you just described. I can't wait to talk to you more about this. But all the wearables and everything else that gives you some unique insights into you, that, that mathematical, unique being that you are, so that we can start to create actionable and personalized treatment plans or plans, if you will, for people. This is where everything is going, right? It has, because you're right. What may be good for you may not be good for me, right? In the same, if we're talking about working out or eating right or doing whatever, there's some nuances that we may need to modify and tweak it. I think absolutely on the right track with all that.
And And you know what, Greg, I just want to share one more thing. It's particularly related to AI, but also to this. There's a side of me as we are, thinking about how do we add more value to everybody who's a member of this thing, and obviously giving them, that tool is one thing. But what's interesting about human behavior, including mine, by the way, probably including yours, although you're much more disciplined than I am on the health side, is that regardless of how many tools, how insane the diagnostics are, how whatever, there's still a gap in terms of affecting behavior and habits, right? Because all of us, especially that are busy, I think you assume health, and therefore you don't prioritize it until that thing becomes like, epically at risk. And then all of a sudden it goes boom. So the reality is that, and we think about this, and I'm going to share with you at least one thing that we're trying to do is that on one hand, we can give you this thing and you're going to be like, holy shit, this is insane how much I'm learning about myself and how crazy it is that this thing understands me. And now I understand my partner, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact is that how do I get you to follow what might be genetically optimized for you uniquely in this plan or whatever? And so one of the things that we're doing is we built this wrapper around it called Catapult. And so although we're giving everybody their individualized guide to themselves, we bring in one thing at a time. This is for busy people, right? One thing at a time, like sleep. Expert comes in and they go deep on the science of sleep, but that sleep gets translated to the technology for you so that you know what to do about your sleep. And what we figured out is that by only asking people to come get exposed to one item at a time for an hour, and then mid-month for 30 minutes just to check in, because back to coughing stuff up in the world, you have to say after that, like, what are the 3 things you're going to do for sleep? And that are unique to you, that are unique to me based on this technology. And what's amazing, dude, is that we've had people who have dropped sleep meds for the first time in 7 years. We have people losing weight for the first time. And so I think we've figured out, like, what's the least amount of time to get somebody to transform health in a way where you're focused on only one thing, not all these things that you just read in a book or went to a talk about, one thing at a time, directly related to you, with just barely enough accountability so that even you and I have a responsibility to make sure we're paying attention to that thing. And it's working. I haven't figured out anything more than that is like coaching and a burden on the masses. Anything less than that is just data from the next Oura ring, and won't affect the way I live my life. And so we don't have it nailed down, but I feel like we're kind of inching our way there to where it's like, yeah, we can give you the data of who you are. You could talk to your own biology, but if you don't change the fact, like if you don't put down the freaking 10 pounds of brisket, like, how are we going to help you?
Yeah.
So,
no, it has to go along with it for sure. Yeah. There's the lifestyle and behavior modification for sure.
That's right. It's tough.
You said something there I was going to touch on and I lost it.
No worries, man. No worries.
Sorry about that.
But I think, back to life, right? Creating this return on life. There's health. So we got a little bit of AI for that. There's business. We're given an AI executive team that's already trained on your business, right? This is breakthrough as well. And then when you need help, you remember how like Iron Man used to have Jarvis?
Yeah.
We're getting further and further along so that there's a Jarvis for you as it relates to anything you need in the network, right? People with the right skills, a friend to go on a vacation, whatever it is. And it's been a long, 2.5 years of building this technology, but it's about to be launched, even more publicly than you right now. Everybody who kind of runs into it, that's pretty cool, joins, and it just adds more network power. But we'll start growing it here pretty soon. But really appreciate your involvement. And like I said, man, we want to take all the great work that you're doing on the functional medicine side and loop it back around because it's inspiring.
Well,
it's another frontier.
What we're doing with, cellular medicine and some of the research that's going to be coming up there, I'd love to share with you here probably after the first of the year. But yeah, we need to sync up and get you down to Cabo. Come down and check out the new facility. And
by the way, here's how this all works together. Hey, here you go, guy. Here's your AI. Holy shit, this thing tells me that I should be waking up late and maybe, eating less and everything else. All right, we're going to help you. And if none of that shit works, just go down to Cabo and order the 6-pack abs, injection. And all right, let's go. You might have the answer.
It worked like that. It doesn't, there's look, it all goes together. They're puzzle pieces. And I tell people all the time, you can come down and do stem cells and yes, it's going to help, but unless you couple it with the lifestyle behaviors and lifestyle modifications and personalized to you, and then, I don't know if I shared this with you, but I had this whole longevity CEO thing. Imagine that. But the idea is, if you're the CEO of your own health and longevity, then what do we do as CEOs? We have visions, right? And then we have this, I want to be 120 or 50 or whatever, if we're talking about. And then we start to try to think about a strategy, and we build a team together to help us build and perfect that strategy, and then put a plan to execute or implement that strategy. And then we use different, data points to measure how well this strategy is working, or this plan is carrying out the strategy. And then we optimize and tweak based on the feedback and the data. And ultimately, hopefully we grow a nice business. That's how we should be doing it with our health. But instead, we outsource that to a consultant or doctor. There is no team. They're all siloed. Imagine if your CEO, CMO, CFO aren't talking to each other. They just are in the same business, but they don't speak. They don't share knowledge. That's how our health is run, right? And we have to get into a mindset of being able to start thinking about, all right, well, I'm going to take some agency over this thing, right? And I'm not poo-pooing all the doctors. What I am saying is, you have to have a more nuanced approach about personalization and being more preventative, getting upstream, like you mentioned earlier, just waiting for that red light to go off and then it's boom. We got to get out of that mindset. And I love what you're doing, because this starts to tell you this is how you're more predisposed, or this is who you are biologically. Now, look, after the Rubicon of 50, 55 years of age, cellular biology and age-related disease and the immune system, it's all going to come back to this, right? So we have to put ourselves in a better position to be able to thrive later in that life. And that's that functional decline I was talking about earlier, slowing it down. Diagnostic tools like this, that give us more and more knowledge, data points, and awareness. Look, I feel like sometimes when people are just aware and they go, oh, okay, so this is the plan. All I have to do is follow this plan. It can shift some of that lifestyle behavior, that behavioral modification you talked about. Because you're right. If I can give you all the data, but if you don't act on it, it's not going to help you. And it's the same true with stem cells. You can come down and get stem cells in Cabo and feel great. But if you go home and sit on the sofa and stop exercising and start eating poorly and don't sleep well and start drinking and smoking or doing something else, it's not going to help. You're going to outdo all the good that you were being done. So it all goes together.
Yeah, and by the way, just to hit that home, I've yet to see the AI function for me suggest that I go outside to have a smoke. So
it doesn't do
pretty
that.
sure. Yeah, I don't know, man. You might have something to it, dude. I mean, if AI says it, But
I love it.
But dude, it's such an important thing, because, and that's why I was telling you when we first started, even before we started hitting the record button, like, we're pioneering things in different ways, right? One of them is how do you even know what between food, exercise, sleep, meditation is like perfectly optimized for you versus the best friend that you guys have a lot in common. And I'll tell you, it's radically different, but this thing is not some, database of exercises. This thing is like, I mean, it's like I said, there's like 16 sciences that are all firing to understand you uniquely. And it's remarkable. And when you sit there with 8 other people that know each other, they're like, that's exactly who you are. That's exactly how, I mean, if you sit down at a restaurant, it knows which of you is going to go like this on the menu and which one, like me, goes, boop, boop, let's go. Right. I'm ready to go. It's really remarkable. And also, I just want to say, I don't have enough medical background, not even close to your experience, to know what's better or worse. I think it all comes together because I think that never before has there been a guide in your hand to your own biology holistically, like the way you view the world, how your behaviors are. It's crazy how accurate this is. But then, it's like all the things around it, nutrition, the supplements you take, like the habits you build, including the plan that you have, and then all the longevity stuff that kicks in still needs to be screened against, like, who are you, right? As a biological unit. And I think that, you're doing incredible stuff on one end, and I'm doing incredible stuff at the other end. But I'm telling you, together and some people in between in this Epics network are helping health optimization become something where it's like part of the culture of a network that you join, right? This is like, that's why I always say it's far beyond like Facebook and LinkedIn and these places that you go. This is a place that you go where even your health, you've got advantages to, like, to progress. And like you said, if you don't start doing this stuff earlier rather than later, there's never a bad time. But, you start to have to play a little bit of catch up later, but it's still a good time to do this. Everything 100%. We're talking about,
100%.
Yeah, man.
So tell everybody where they find it. How did we find Epics Global?
Well, you just said it, man. That's the URL.
The URL.
Love it. There you go. Like, spell it out. Elephant X-ray, Paul. No, epx.global. And there's a free version which you still get access to the AI for health stuff. The AI for business stuff, you have to be a paid member, but we're just happy to have people there. The way that culture is, the number one core value is help first and help often, which means that bring your badass resume and everything that makes you you, and just roll in here, because wherever you want to go with adventure or achievement or personal health and peak performance, it's going to go faster here. But the way it goes faster is you might be the X factor for somebody else, and we'll make those connections happen. But it's just a different deal. It's just good for people. I can't even tell you, we have businesses starting out this thing, tons of achievement, tons of people, investors hiring each other, partners. But on the health side, we have people that are finding new gears in their own mentality, new comfort with themselves, new dropping, meds and all this stuff. It's happening no matter where. And we even have people that have both of those things nailed, but they didn't have adventure in their life. And that's a very important thing, is that you didn't die like, Steve Jobs, where you're like, man, I wish I would have done that. We make sure that you're not that either. It's good for life, all of us, so
I love this platform.
I appreciate you.
Remember a year ago when you were explaining it to me, I was like, wait a minute, everybody's just helping each other? Like, what's the cat? Well, I don't get it.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, that's actually how the entire, fundamentally how we built it. I mean,
the crazy thing, dude, is, I told you, because you've got some referrals that you'll bring in, is that the people that are in it, I mean, first of all, I don't see any difference personally between a single mom of 5 and a space shuttle captain, right? So that's the beauty of this, right?
Yeah.
But in case somebody wants to be surrounded by greatness, so you too become great, we've got space shuttle captains. We got guys swimming oceans,
killers,
skiing down from the top of Mount Everest. We got gold World Cup champions, gold medalists, people like you that are pioneering stuff. But everybody is just a unit of one, right? Trying to do the best they can, needs a little bit of help, and we just make sure that shit happens.
Yeah,
right?
Pair it up. Awesome.
Hell yeah.
Paul, thank you so much.
What a good conversation, man.
What a great conversation. Thank you. epx.global. Paul Kirchhoff. I'll have it in all the show notes and stuff too, but man, I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Me too, man. Love you, buddy. One text and do it, brother, to another.
Love you, man.
Appreciate this. All right.
The
Take
Republic.
care. Have a great one.